Hi. Did you know that hearing loss is scientifically shown to contribute or possibly increase the risk of Alzheimer's and complete cognitive decline by 500%? That's one whopping number. And that doesn't even mention the fact that hearing loss can contribute to things like depression, as well as falls because your balance is just off. You know, not too long ago, I did a poll for one of my clients, and I had 12,000 responses when I asked people what were they most concerned with: cancer, heart attacks, memory loss. And you know what won by 90%? Hearing loss. Excuse me, memory. Okay, we're going to keep going with this because this is a live take, and this is what we do here. So memory was the number one thing everyone was concerned about. So when I heard about this book by Dr. Robert Keefer, and what he wrote about was the Alzheimer's hearing aid paradox, in search of sanity, I just was like, wow, I got to interview this guy because I want to understand how hearing loss and Alzheimer's, dementia are connected, because this is serious stuff for all of us to be concerned about. So thank you very much for joining me, Dr. Keefer.
It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to meet you. And I'm glad you're interested.
I am really interested in this. You know, you've had a long history in pharmaceutical, med technology, medical device development. Where did the passion for figuring out, zooming in on hearing loss and ultimately coming up with these correlations with hearing loss and dementia and Alzheimer's?
Great question. Passion is a good word to describe my interest in this. How it happened was some years ago, probably 20 years ago, I got a consulting job with a German medical device company that had invented a new device that helps audiologists fine-tune the performance of hearing aids. And that was in Germany. And they hired me as a consultant to get the necessary approvals in the United States to market that device here in the U.S. And while I was working with them, I discovered that there isn't a market for it in the United States. Interesting, because audiologists are not required to use the best practices of their own profession here. And this device really facilitates audiologists in Germany and Spain and France and England to follow the best practices and make sure that hearing aids are fine-tuned to the patient's exact needs.
You know, it's so interesting you say that, because that was one of the pages I folded down, in your book.
Yeah.
Talking about making sure you talk to an audiologist if you're going to get a hearing aid to make sure it's fitted by best practices and tweaked or...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why isn't that happening here?
Great question. I'm hopeful that perhaps with your help and other people's help, we raise the level of awareness and concern for this. I can only speculate. I suspect it's because there's some big money and politics associated or linked to keeping things as is. That can come across too negative. I love America, but reality is reality.
Me too, but money is money, and insurance companies don't want to pay for anything they don't have to, and doctors are overworked. increasingly jamming their schedules. And that includes the audiologist or the ENT who gets very little time with the patient before they're supposed to see the next one. It's kind of like a factory system.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And I would imagine setting hearing aids to fit someone takes a considerable amount of time.
It does. And, I would not want to throw a wet blanket over the entire profession.
Of course not.
There are certainly audiologists that do follow the best practices. And the book shows you how to find those particular audiologists.
Exactly, which I thought was a great point of the book. One of those pages I folded down.
Yeah.
Questions to ask them.
Yes.
Are you going to do this or that?
Yep.
But okay. Let's get into the Alzheimer's hearing aid connection.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to lose their memory. That's a big fear. I had polled 12,000 people, and that was their number one thing they're afraid of with getting older. They're not worried about cancer, shockingly. They're not worrying about heart attacks, shockingly. No, they want to keep their memory. What is the connection with hearing loss and Alzheimer's or dementia?
Well, the exact connection needs to be further researched.
Okay.
But we know that there's a connection because Dr. Frank Lin, I hope he gets a chance to watch this podcast at some point in time, but Frank Lin at Johns Hopkins University, and using some money, a lot of money from the National Institutes of Health, conducted what's called a long-term trial. They followed several thousand people as they aged and found that people with hearing loss have up to 500% higher risk of dementia, including Alzheimer's, as well as falls with broken bones and clinical depression. So what is the connection? We don't know exactly. I have theories about it. I trained
Let's
in
talk
medical
about some of those theories.
Yes. Our brain is really an amalgamation of neural networks, millions of neural networks. I've heard it estimated that there might be as many as $300 billion network connections in our brain. Well, my theory, and I've got a doctorate that kind of is a license to theorize about these things. My theory is that when you don't use those neural networks, they go into decline. I think Nike was famous for use it or lose it. I think that that's what's going on there. Do I have the proof of that? I don't have the proof. But there's little to be lost and a lot to be gained by actually employing hearing aids, well-tuned, finely tuned hearing aids to facilitate your hearing and keep those neural networks going.
I can believe what you said and think there's probably a lot of validity in it, in that one of the interesting things I've read a lot about with hearing loss is the isolation that people are tempted to do. And whether that's because they're picking up sounds in the background or they just don't want to be in a crowd because they can't hear as well. But isolation, I don't think it'd be good for anybody's long-term memory because you're lacking that conversation, that stimulation,
Exactly.
that triggering, that conversations, get you fired up one way or another, good,
That's
bad, or
right.
ugly. They keep you going.
That's right. And if your family was anything like my family growing up, we all had aunts and uncles that we'd go to a family gathering, and invariably there would be an uncle or an aunt that sits over in the corner that doesn't participate all of the time. And guess guess what? That is social isolation. And with social isolation, it just exacerbates your risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. Again, that's my theory. There needs to be a lot more research here and a lot more money poured into that kind of research.
You know, one of the things I think a lot about is I was an older mom, but I've got now a 21 and 25-year-old. But not once in the school year like we used to have, you know, you had those seeing charts that would determine whether you need glasses. And, you know, once a year, all the kids lined up and you had to stand in front of the chart. And then you moved over to the next section where they did the hearing test, you know, and you put on the thing and you raised your hand if you heard things. That never happened with our children, not once in school, unless we took them elsewhere, you know, to get those tests done when we kind of thought, gee, is this something, you know, eye tests. Yeah, doctor did an eye test, but never a hearing test. And when I think of how kids today, you see them walking around, or not just kids, people of all ages, walking around with their, you know, headphones on, either the big, you know, master blasters on your ears or the ones, you know, the pods. Like, what is that doing to people's hearing? And especially at younger years than ever. We didn't grow up with, you know, those earbuds in that heat up.
I suspect it's hurting a lot of people and hurting their hearing specifically. But it depends on what volume they turn up those the music to. It depends on that. Again, I'm not an expert on that, but I've lived long enough and read enough and studied enough and talked to enough audiologists because I eventually got into the profession myself with a hearing aid and audiology clinic in Raleigh, North Carolina, that I've had the opportunity to talk with many, many audiologists and hearing aid dealers, as well as people with hearing loss. So I feel pretty confident in what I say about that.
Now, was that the catalyst for writing this book?
Great question. As I look back on my career, which is a little bit spotty, if you will, because I kept getting interested in different opportunities. And now that I look back on my career, I think that I've been most attracted to unmet health conditions. I started up in cancer research, did a postdoc in it, and I was interested in why do some cancers respond to anti-cancer drugs and others don't. Then I got interested in clinical diagnostics and did a postdoc there. And I was always interested in the latest laboratory tests that would address some sort of unmet need. Then later, with some venture capitalists, I started up an environmental testing laboratory that was meeting an unmet need. Remember Love Canal and the other, the many toxic waste sites that we have across the United States. I started up one of the first environmental testing laboratories as well. From there, the chemical industry hired me to help a nonprofit toxicology research institute in Research Triangle Park. And again, that one is a kind of a deep barrel that we don't need to go into right now. But for some reason, I'm attracted to unmet healthcare needs. And
Well, they move along the clinical trial process a little quicker usually.
Yeah, they do. Well,
that usually was what I ended up working with over the years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I want to know more about that.
That's for another podcast.
Okay.
Or a conversation over dinner.
I would love to hear that. So getting to answer to your question, Here I started up a company by the name of Now Hear This, an audiology and hearing clinic in Raleigh, North Carolina, based solely on the fact that I felt like there was an unmet need there. That a clinic.
And what I find interesting about that, and I'm sorry, is that when you say unmet medical need, so often those are orphan drugs. It's small populations you're talking about, very small populations. Yes. But you look at the number of the percentage of hearing loss. Somewhere I found some huge number of the number of people that are going to have significant hearing loss. This is a big need that is unmet.
Huge need. And it's kind of a double-barreled need as well. 6 million, well, the number's always changing depending on how you count this, but the estimates from the National Institutes of Health are that we have around 6 to 7 million Americans with hearing loss, but only 20% of them are using hearing aids. And so right there is an unmet need, in my view.
Yeah.
The other unmet need is that the data are clear. There's books written about it, that people with advanced audiology degrees, PhDs in it, as well as hearing aid dealers, are not even using the best practices of their own profession. So to me, that just screams unmet need.
What are those best practices that someone should be looking for?
Well, it's described in my book.
Yes.
The principal one is called real ear measurement. I hate the term, but it's called real ear measurement. I think a better term would have been real hearing measurements. It turns out it seems somewhat logical to me now after working in the industry this long, but it wasn't immediate. But it makes sense to you and to most of us that the ear canal, our ear canal, shapes the sound of that are coming into our outer ear, shapes the sound going through the ear canal and getting to the eardrum, and shapes it in a big-time way.
Yeah.
And so real ear measurement is actually a tiny little probe microphone that the audiologist puts into the ear canal, and it's attached to a computer. So they're feeding the ear these particular sounds, and then it's recording how much of it is actually reaching the eardrum across the whole spectrum of bass to treble. So the audiologist can use that information to better adjust or fine-tune the hearing aids. That's called a real ear measurement.
And why don't you think that's used more often? Is it lack of knowledge? Is it lack of money to get that technology in your office? Is it lack of time within the medical system?
Well, for one thing, Medicare and insurance companies that cover hearing health care don't require audiologists and hearing aid dealers to use the best practices. I think a second reason is because it takes an extra half an hour. And hearing aid dealers and audiologists are, they want to be as efficient as possible, and so they bypass that. I think that eventually, if they're not using those kind of practices over a period of time, then they become uncomfortable resurrecting that procedure and using it on the next patient. All of those different dynamics work together, but it's not me. There's Brian Taylor, who wrote a book along with Gus Mueller about the hearing industry and about fitting hearing aids. They did a study and found that 4 out of 5 audiologists and hearing aid dealers don't even use the best practices. They didn't investigate why. So again, you're talking to someone who's more than willing to theorize what's going on, but I believe it's for those reasons.
Now, hearing aids have been around a long time. A lot of people who have hearing loss don't want to wear hearing aids.
Right.
Why? You cover some points in your book, but I'd love to hear you opine on them here.
For one thing, they've got a reputation for not ever working well. Mm-hmm. People buy cheap hearing aids, or they could buy expensive hearing aids that haven't been fine-tuned just right. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what they do? They tell everyone they know that I spent all of this money on hearing aids, and everyone that hears that says, well, that's just one more reason why I'm not going to get hearing aids.
Right.
Yeah. Second reason is afraid of looking older. Mm-hmm. None of us want to look older, but now that we've got some hearing aids hanging on the back of our ear, that's just another sign that we're getting older, or we're afraid of it.
Our egos and vanity, I tell you.
Yeah, I call it ego for sure. Yeah, in the book I describe that as well. Yeah, ego gets in the way of a lot of things in life. Yeah.
Huh. Alzheimer's seems to be increasing. Do you think there's a parallel of a rise of hearing loss with Alzheimer's? Do you think there's some crossover correlation there, using your more researcher kind of
brain?
Yeah.
Well, we're an aging population. So,
yes.
And hearing loss is one of the top 5 health conditions related to aging. Mm-hmm. So larger population means more people with hearing loss.
In Search of Sanity. What's your subtitle here?
I thought long and hard about that, and the publisher I was using at the time, they kind of thought of that major title, the Alzheimer's hearing aid paradox, because they're both puzzles that have not been solved yet. And I thought that the subtitle, In Search of Sanity, would perhaps induce people to say, I need to help take action on this, if not for everyone with hearing loss, at least for me. And I thought that the tie-in between insanity and Alzheimer's might work.
Yeah, I thought it had a good double entendre. Like, we don't want, Alzheimer's, dementia. Does that make you insane? I guess it depends on what era of medicine we're in. Some people might say yes, because you're losing your mind, so less sane. So you could say, I guess that could be extrapolated out. But at the same time, I find myself saying, in search of sanity, on the flip side of that double entendre of, why aren't we pushing this more? Why aren't we helping people? I mean, I'm such an advocate for preventive medicine. I've always been a preventive medicine person, complementary medicine. And then I spent 30 years also working in the biotech and pharma industry. And, really, delving down and breaking down clinical trials and what's working, how can we look at that data and define it and help the shareholders and the stakeholders understand it. But your book raises so many interesting points of why are we not being more preventive with this?
It's a great question, and it's a pervasive question, too. Just a few years ago, you probably remember that there was this big push in Congress to start covering permitting the sale of over-the-counter hearing aids.
Yes.
Yes. And somehow they got convinced, and I'll leave it to you to we could speculate over a glass of wine as to why members of Congress passed laws permitting the sale of over-the-counter hearing aids, cheap over-the-counter hearing aids. They were convinced to do so by, guess what, the manufacturers of those inexpensive hearing aids. They are not medical-grade hearing aids by any means.
Okay, let's talk about that. That's a good segue here. So I do very much remember when you were seeing every day that Congress is approving that you don't have to spend that $5,000 or $8,000 for your hearing aid. You can go get one over the counter. They never actually said what that over the counter was going to cost. And they didn't say, were you supposed to just order it on mail and pop it in your ears, or what would that be like? There was never that extended part of the PR campaign, as I'll say.
That's right.
So what happened there? Why did it happen? What were the catalysts for it? Was it that people were just complaining to their local senator and congressman that hearing aids are too expensive? Or was it lobbying by those manufacturers? Or was it a combination of, it's just a good headline, we're going to help the underdog?
Well, I wasn't in the conversation, obviously.
Well, we're just looking for opinions here.
Yes. I am pretty darn sure it was the electronic consumers, the consumer electronics industry is 10 times larger than the hearing aid industry.
Wow. So you think consumer electronics.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Interesting.
They've got the money to hire lobbyists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gives consumer electronics makers just that extra division and potential revenue stream they can lock. Do they have to go through traditional clinical, medical device trials to, launch these cheaper versions of hearing aids? No. Holy moly. So you're talking about massive savings, zero proof of concept.
Yeah. You've got it nailed.
Wow. Lack of any validation of even potentially causing more damage.
Most definitely. Yeah. And I can tell you worked in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry because you're using the right terminology. Yes, there were no clinical trials required.
Wow.
None.
So no 510Ks to say, here's your new over-the-counter hearing aid?
No.
Wow.
I don't want to, I didn't pay that close attention to it. I don't know what kind of proof was required to sell over-the-counter hearing aids. But you can now get over-the-counter hearing aids for $300 and $400, and they're not adjustable.
I can't imagine that. Yeah. I cannot imagine that because, as I mentioned to you, I had 3 back-to-back concussions and woke up one day thinking my earpods weren't working when I went to go answer a phone call, and I'm there with my wired, pods in my ear, and I'm like, wait a second, I don't hear who's on this line. What's going on? And I'm thinking, I just bought these 3 weeks ago. Now they're broken. And no, it was my ear that was broken. But, I will say your book was interesting because I was told hearing aids would not be an option for me for a variety of reasons. But the thought of even trying one, because I think there's a fear factor in there of, once you've lost your hearing, or in my case, more than 50% of it, you don't want to do anything that damages that last little bit you've got. So it's almost like when you do those audiology tests and you want to jump up and strangle the person on the other side of that screen because they've hurt you from the sound that they're injecting into your head to try to figure out the level of the sound you can tolerate.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember looking at the audiologist saying, like, did you seriously need to subject me to that after I can't hear? So I think there's a fear factor for anyone who's experienced that, because I equate hearing aids. So I need you, because you're the expert here, to correct me and correct what I think could be a general misconception of, have you ever been in a concert when the microphone gets that reverb and you hear that loud?
Makes you jump out of your seat.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are of the notion of, I just don't want any more sound that could bother me.
It's excruciating pain.
Yeah.
If it's the right tone and the right volume, it's just excruciating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that calibration is incredibly important.
It is. And good, caring people that want to do the right thing for your hearing. Mm-hmm. By the way, did they ever offer some sort of alternative hearing aid device like bone-anchored hearing aids?
No, the only thing I was ever told was to try, as a last resort, was to try hyperbaric
oxygen. Yeah.
Oxygen.
Yes.
And when I read all about that and saw the degree of people who get vertigo, I'm like, listen, I don't have vertigo. I don't have, ringing in my ear. I just have a little difference in how I hear. Sure. So I'm not willing to take that risk to potentially get vertigo.
Yeah. Well, there are alternative hearing aids that an audiologist,
which you outlined in your book,
an ENT can help you with. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, I am not.
And I'm vain, but not that vain enough to care if they're sticking out. I wouldn't care if I went to a concert recently here at the Hammerstein Ballroom, and I've got my earplugs in, and I've got my, Bose sound canceling device on. I'm walking through the crowd like a bumper person. I didn't care. I didn't want anything to impact my hearing, but I wanted to get the vibe of the crowd.
Yeah. Yeah. Certain sounds can be just excruciatingly painful.
Why is that? What is it that happens once you've had hearing loss that certain sounds just like you hear them differently?
I think they would call it hyperacuity. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they know the exact mechanism by which that happens. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've used that word hyperacuity for some time.
But it's a good word, and it's the word I would have used. I think you become hyperacute to certain sounds. It's like, yes. And here's a funny hearing story. About 6 or 7 months before waking up with no hearing in my right side, I get this, my husband calls me up and says, is there a reason you ordered 30 earplugs? I'm like, I didn't order 30 earplugs. And he goes, Diane, we have a box here. It's got your name on it. And there's 30 different little packages of earplugs in it. I'm like, that's really funny. So I call Amazon. Amazon says, we have no idea what this is about. I see the company says Vibes. I contact the company. I say, I have a package here. I see online these earplugs are like $30 a piece, and I have 30 of them here. So this is somebody's package. I'd be happy to send it. They're like, we have no idea why you got this package. So I'm like, I keep it in my, I just leave it in my office thinking, okay, someday I'll find somebody who needs earplugs and I'll give them the earplugs. Yeah. And when I ended up realizing and going to the ENTs and finding out, no, I definitely had, hearing loss. But being in a restaurant, when I would hear certain sounds, I said, I'm going to go back and test out those earplugs. Yeah. And I put the earplugs in and they deaden the sound, but I can hear. It looks like I have these 2 little tubes sticking out of my ears, but I don't care. But it's why I say I can understand the use of the phrase hyperacuity, because it's like my hearing level went up on certain sounds, like almost this overcompensation.
Yeah. Yeah. Something in there that you just said kind of triggers something I think I talk about in the book, too.
Mm-hmm.
It's common for people to say, I hear, but I don't understand.
Yes. Well, one of the things you pointed out with television is, I mean, it's the running joke in our house. Can we put the subtitles on?
Yeah.
And they all say, Mom wants those because she's a reader. She doesn't really like television. I'm like, well, whatever the reason,
Yeah.
I have no idea what they're talking about. Can we get those subtitles?
Yeah. 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 We have trouble with certain sounds, important sounds, consonants, frequently, that we need to be able to accurately hear in order to differentiate between words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things you pointed out was, two things along that line was the idea that Alzheimer's or dementia could possibly accelerate up to that 500% more with someone who has hearing loss because parts of their brain are possibly struggling to hear a language in different ways and just kind of burning out. It's like, you drink, too much coffee or, you keep your serotonin, you're constantly letting dopamine out. Eventually you could have a problem there,
Yeah. Yeah. At the very least, it leaves that portion of the brain or those neural networks unused. And they don't know what to do with the information when they do hear it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You also had a very interesting, oh my gosh, why can't I think of her name? The person who did Braille.
Helen Keller.
Helen Keller.
Yes.
Okay. Oh no, let's not call this memory loss. My recall. No, Helen Keller. And you had a great quote in here about her that it was something to the effect of, lack of seeing, you miss things. Lack of hearing, you miss connection.
Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, said something similar. Not to see disconnects us from things, not to hear disconnects us from people.
Yeah. It's such a profound statement.
Yes. I would have loved to have met Immanuel Kant. I mean, he was a genius, really. Just philosopher and a half. Really, it would be fun. Something that we were just talking about causes me to bring this up. I'm sure you read it in the book. People with hearing loss have up to 500, well, it's more like they think it's around 300%, which triple the risk of falls with broken bones. People need to know the significance of falls with broken bones as we get older. I think I don't have the book in front of me right now, but the fact is that people over the age of 65 that fall and break their hip, a high percentage of them are dead within 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
Because broken hips are so difficult to treat, especially as we age. At the very least, they're spending a lot of time in the hospital, which is eating up their insurance, raising the costs of Medicare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's just huge implications for broken bones.
Yeah.
Too.
That statistic doesn't surprise me. And I remember when my father broke his hip. To me, it was the beginning of the end of his life.
Really?
It was just plain the lack of mobility changed, and he was always an active guy. It just started to change everything with how he approached life. And, I I always say one thing hearing loss did for me is left someone in my life a huge platform shoe collection. Because even though the 3 concussions I had, I happened to have had sneakers on, which were very rare moments for me because I'm a big platform shoe collector. Must be like some 70s thing that I'm stuck with, and then I lived through the 80s. But I stopped wearing platform shoes because one of the things I don't ever want to do is do anything that contributes to a fall. And, in some ways I say, oh my gosh, Diane, that sounds so old. And I'm like, well, you are 65, but at any point, meanwhile, I have a son who does extreme skateboarding that just smashes himself into sidewalks constantly. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's that going to do to the kid's hips, when he's a little older? But you don't want to fall. And that hearing difference can be significant. I don't want to. I was talking to someone about dancing and twisting and turning, and just playing a quick turn when your hearing's different can put you into a state of vertigo or imbalance.
Good point. And I think we would need an audiologist to join our conversation, but I believe what's going a lot in people with hearing loss is that we're in a crowded mall, for example. You hear a sudden sound, and it doesn't make sense to your brain.
Where is it?
And you jerk your head like this, and jerking your head can cause you to lose your balance and fall.
Yeah. Now, would hearing aids help someone out with that?
Sure. Sure.
Do hearing aids, would hearing
well-adjusted hearing aids.
Adjusted hearing aids, the big crucial point.
Yes.
Would they help someone with peripheral sounds? Because you hear people, say, I don't know where that sound's coming from.
Yes. Yeah. Hearing aids, well-adjusted hearing aids, open up your brain to hearing all of the sounds that make more sense to you, allow you to process those sounds much better, so to speak.
It's an interesting point you make about hearing a loud sound and somebody being startled.
Yeah.
And tying together that hearing loss with the falls. That's a good explanation as to why those falls increase with hearing loss.
I hope it's an accurate explanation, too. Again, I'm not an orthopedic surgeon. I'm not a licensed audiologist or an ENT. But that's after having talked with probably 2,000 or 3,000 audiologists in my hearing industry career, and to thousands of patients who came to our clinic or were thinking about coming to our clinic for hearing loss. That's my assessment of what's going on.
So you've spoken with 2,000 or 3,000 audiologists.
Yeah.
There are a variety of hearing aid companies.
Yes.
You're seeing more of them advertised now.
Yeah.
What do you look for in a hearing aid besides that you want it to be able to hear? Like, are there things that you should think about if you were going to go buy one or go talk to someone about buying one?
Well, one of the first things that I want to assure your listeners and your watchers of this, there's about five or six, depends on how you count them, 5 or 6 hearing aid companies that make medical grade hearing aids. And I have to rely on what I've heard from other audiologists or from audiologists. The difference between one manufacturer and the other is incremental. They're all terrific hearing aids. They're all great hearing aids that help you hear accurately across the whole energy spectrum. More important is finding the audiologist who's using the best practices of their profession to fine-tune those hearing aids.
Has the ability to fine-tune them improved over the years? Have there been advances in the design of a hearing aid, or are the advances in the understanding of the need to fine-tune them, or is it a combo of both?
Combination of both. I will say, and again, I'm not an audiologist, and I'm not a real expert with all of the manufacturers who make hearing aids, but they've got incredibly sophisticated technology all embedded right in those hearing aids. So I would say that they're cream of the crop. The most sophisticated and advanced technologies are in there, and they do process sounds quicker and better than the old cheaper, than the old style hearing aids.
I haven't looked into them, but someone was recently telling me that Apple's new EarPods are you can have them tweaked to be a form of a hearing aid. I can't exactly imagine that.
I have trouble imagining it too, yeah. and I'm not an expert on that. I just happened to write a book about the unmet needs in the hearing industry, and the unmet need of Medicare stepping up to the plate and start doing the right thing. After all, Medicare covers all of the other health conditions related to aging. Why not hearing?
Why not? Let's get an opinion on that. I mean, because it is crazy with all the things,
Yeah. And you'd think they'd be keen on it, given the age of most people in Congress.
Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't want to hear each other. Maybe they're just burnt out from all the
they're experiencing hearing loss just like the rest of us.
Right.
They should be jumping all over it to do something.
Yeah.
And it would save so much money. Alzheimer's care, as you probably know, invariably it has some variability in some of these estimates, but it costs something like $25,000 a month to cover, to care for someone with who's aging and is in the early stages and the advanced stages of Alzheimer's care or dementia care or hearing loss. $30,000 a month?
That's a mind-boggling number.
These estimate by other authors is that we're currently spending about $250 billion a year on Alzheimer's care alone. Now, I think that includes dementia as well. And it's expected to accelerate to $1 trillion within the next 10 years because of our advancing age of our population. We should be covering hearing aids. We can argue about whether how much is this going to reduce it, the cost. We can argue about that. I'm not an economist, and that would take a pretty sophisticated model and some economists working on it. But it just makes sense. It just makes sense. Yeah. We should cover hearing aid. It's the right thing to do.
I tell you, the time goes too fast on this podcast, but I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
At what point in life do you think people should start to get their hearing checked? And how often should they do it so they can determine the impact that hearing loss might be having on them?
Early to mid-50s. Certainly when you're a child. Yeah. Certainly when you're a child, because it can impair your ability to learn. And but for most of us, assuming there hasn't been some sort of organic hearing impairment when we're young or some sort of accident that hurt our hearing, we should be going to an audiologist in our 50s and doing something about it.
That was my next question. So at what point, if someone notices a decline in their hearing, do you recommend they take that next step and say, you know what, why live with a decline? Just get those hearing aids. Do you recommend it right away, or do you recommend somebody lives with it? I was going to say as soon as possible.
As soon as possible. ASAP.
Yeah.
Yes. What's the downside?
Yeah.
There isn't any downside, except your ego. Mm-hmm. Yeah, worrying about what other people think of you. And it's not a big issue to wear hearing aids. They add value to your life. I wear them.
Oh, yeah.
They add value to my life. Mm-hmm. My lady, Diane, wonders whether I can hear everything. But there might be other dynamics in there, too. Yeah.
Well, oh my gosh, like I said, this time goes too fast. I have been speaking with Dr. Robert Keefer. He's the author of The Alzheimer's Hearing Aid Paradox. And wow, I sure learned a lot, and I highly encourage everyone to be sharing this episode and watching it, and share with people you love that you think maybe might be losing their hearing, and just say, give it a listen. No pun intended. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sure. I might add, if you don't
please do.
mind, I'm in the course of writing a second book about it. And it's the title is Hear Better, Live Longer.
It's a great title.
We'll see how all of that works out. But if I can be found on LinkedIn. I'm not much of a Facebook person, but I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm keeping people posted about the progress of the book, too.
Perfect. Well, everyone, Dr. Keefer's information will be below this podcast, so you'll have live links where you can stay in touch with him, and I highly recommend you do. And there'll be a link to his Buy the Book page, because I recommend that as well. This is an easy way to gently approach a conversation, maybe with someone that you love, who you think their life could benefit from hearing better and enjoying conversations, which is what this whole show is about. I'm Dian Griesel. This has been the Silver Expedience Perception Dynamics podcast. We're recording here in Manhattan Center, which is so cool. We're in TV too. I love this place. Thank you, Manhattan Center. And thank you, Bob. This was really a pleasure.
My pleasure entirely, really. It was wonderful. You did a great job of interviewing, the best interview I've ever had.
Oh. I bet you say that to all the interviewers.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Please hit subscribe and share this episode with your friends.